ho, ho. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Storytime by Santa. Sit back, relax, and enjoy these wonderful stories that Santa is going to read to you, your family members, and your children. I hope you have a wonderful time. And if you like, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Santa loves you. Ho, ho, ho. Enjoy. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. I hope you're going to enjoy another version of Storytime by Santa. I hope your hot cocoa is hot. The Little Drummer Boy's Gift. Once upon a time, in a small village, nestled at the foot of a snowy mountain, there lived a young boy named Benjamin, known to everybody as Benji. Benji had a talent that made him special. He played the drums. No matter where he went, you could hear the gentle rhythm of the little drum following behind him. He would play for the villagers, for his friends, and even for the animals in the forest. His magic, his music, was simple, but it was always made people smile. As Christmas approached, the village buzzed with excitement. The air was filled with the scent of pine trees. The streets were decorated with twinkling lights, and everybody was preparing gifts for the annual Christmas festival. It was a time when the whole village came together to share their love and joy with one another, and each person gave a special gift during the big celebration. But this year, Benji felt uncertain. He loved playing his drum, but he didn't have any fancy presents like the other villagers. His family didn't have much money, and he worried that his simple drumming wouldn't be enough to offer as a gift. As he watched his friends preparing their beautiful gifts, handmade toys, delicious treats, and sparkling decorations, he couldn't help but notice that he was feeling sad. What could I give that would be special enough? Benji wondered. Looking down at his drum, his best friend Amelia noticed his gloomy expression. "What's wrong, Benji?" she asked. "You always seem so happy, especially at Christmas." Benji sighed. "I don't have a special gift for Christmas festival. Everyone else has something amazing, but all I have is my drum. It's just not enough." Amelia smiled kindly. "Your music makes people happy, Benji. Isn't that special? Isn't that a special gift?" Benji thought about it, but still wasn't sure. How could a little drum compare to all the wonderful things that others were giving? As the days went by and the festival drew closer, Benji practiced drumming his drum in secret, hoping that maybe, just maybe, he could come up with a song that would be good enough to share. But every time he played, doubt crept into his heart. One evening, as Benji sat by the fire with his family, his father, who was wise and kind, noticed his son's troubled look. "Benji," his father said gently, "I can tell something is bothering you. You've hardly played your drum today. What's on your mind?" Benji hesitated, then opened up. "Everybody has such wonderful gifts for the Christmas festival, but I don't have anything special to give. All I have is my drum, and I'm afraid it's not good enough." His father smiled warmly. "Gifts come from the heart, my son. It doesn't matter how big or small they are. What matters is the love and the thought behind them. Your music is a gift, even if it's not wrapped in ribbons or shiny paper." Benji thought about his father's words, but he still felt unsure. He wanted his gift to be meaningful, to make a real difference. The night before the Christmas festival, something magical happened. As Benji laid awake, listening to the wind gently blowing outside, he heard a soft, faint sound. It was the jingling of bells. Santa Claus himself was visiting the village. Without thinking, Benji grabbed his drum and quickly tiptoed outside. There, near the village square, he saw Santa standing by his sleigh, preparing to leave after delivering gifts to the children. Benji's heart raced. This was his chance to ask for advice. He approached Santa cautiously. "Santa?" Benji called softly. Santa turned with a warm smile, his eyes twinkling like the stars above. "Why, hello, young Benji. What brings you out on this cold night?" Benji hesitated, but then he poured out his worries. "I don't have a special gift for the Christmas festival. All I have is my drum, but I don't think it's enough. I want to give something that truly matters." Santa listened carefully, then placed a hand on Benji's shoulder. "Benji, the most important gifts don't come from stores or factories. They come from the heart, just like your music. When you play your drum, you give people joy, and that is one of the greatest gifts of all." Benji felt a warmth spread through him as Santa's words sank in. Maybe his drum would be a special gift after all. "But Santa," he continued, "I think there's someone who needs your gift most of all. Someone who could use a little joy this Christmas." Santa pointed towards the edge of the village where an elderly woman named Miss Haversford lived. Miss Haverford had always been kind, but she had grown lonely since her children had moved far away. Benji had noticed she hadn't been her usual cheerful self lately, and she didn't have any decorations up for Christmas. "Perhaps you could share your music with her," Santa said with a smile. With renowned hope, Benji nodded and thanked Santa and rushed to Mrs. Haverford's cottage, his little drum tucked under his arm. When he reached her door, he hesitated for a moment, but then knocked softly. Miss Haverford opened the door, surprised to see Benji standing there. "Hello, Miss Haverford," Benji said shyly. "I know you might be feeling a little lonely this Christmas, and I thought I could share something with you. I don't have much to give, but I'd like to play you a song on my drum." Miss Haverford's eyes softened and she smiled warmly. "That would be lovely, Benji." Benji began to play. It was a simple tune, just as a steady beat that echoed through the quiet night. But as he played, something magical happened. The sadness seemed to melt from Miss Haverford's face, and a smile spread across her lips. The music filled the air with warmth and joy, as though it carried the very spirit of Christmas in every note. When Benji finished, Miss Haverford's eyes glistened with tears. Tears of happiness. Thank you, Benji. That was the most beautiful gift I've ever received. Benji beamed with pride. His heart felt light, and he realized that Santa and his father had been right all along. His music, simply as it was, had brought joy to someone who truly needed it. That was the greatest gift of all. The next day, at the Christmas festival, Benji played his drum once more, this time for the entire village. As the rhythm of the music filled the air, the villagers clapped and sang along, their faces glowing with happiness. Benji no longer doubted the value of his gift. He knew that his music, played with love, was more than enough. The end. The life lesson, the story of the little drummer boy's gift, teaches us that the most valuable gifts don't come from stories or have to be big or expensive. What matters is the love and the thought behind them. A gift from the heart, no matter how simple, can bring joy and make a real difference in someone's life. Isn't that awesome? Here we go with number 2. Are you excited? I hope your cocoa is still warm. The Christmas Lighthouse Keeper. Once upon a time, on a snowy coastline where the sea met the sky, stood an old tall lighthouse. It had been there for as long as anybody could remember, guiding ships safely to shore with its bright shining light. The keeper of this lighthouse was a kind old man named Mr. Nicholas. Though the villagers lovingly called him Nick. Mr. Nicholas lived alone in the lighthouse with his faithful dog, Buddy. Every evening, he would climb the long spiral staircase to the top of the lighthouse, light the great lantern, and let its beam shine far out across the sea. Ships sailing near the rocky shore relied on its light to stay safe. Even on the darkest, stormiest nights, the light never went out. But this year, something was different. Christmas was fast approaching, and a fierce winter storm was moving in. The village was covered in a thick blanket of snow, and the wind howled like a wild animal. The storm was so strong that it almost impossible to go outside, and the villagers worried about it might last all through Christmas. Up in the lighthouse, Mr. Nicholas gazed out over the sea, watching as the waves crashed over the rocks. He knew that in weather like this, the lighthouse was more important than ever. Ships would need its guiding light to stay safe, especially with the storm growing worse. As he prepared the lantern for the night, Buddy barked at the door. Nick opened it to find Charlie, a young boy from the village, standing outside. Charlie was bundled up in a thick coat and scarf, his cheeks rosy from the cold. "Mr. Nicholas," Charlie said, his voice trembling a little, "my dad's fishing boat is out at sea, and I'm worried. The storm is so bad, and I'm afraid they won't find their way home." Mr. Nicholas knelt down and put a reassuring hand on Charlie's shoulder. "Don't worry, laddie," he said with a kind smile. "As long as the lighthouse is shining, your dad will have a safe path back home. I'll keep the light on all night, no matter what." Charlie nodded, trusting the old lighthouse keeper's words, and hurried back to the village. That night the storm grew even fiercer. The wind whipped around the lighthouse, rattling the windows and howling through the cracks in the walls. The snow felt so heavy that it was hard to see. more than a few feet in front of you. But still, Mr. Nicholas climbed the stairs to the top of the lighthouse, lit the great lantern, and watched as its golden beam cut through the darkness. Hours passed and the storm didn't let up. Mr. Nicholas felt the deep responsibility to keep the light shining, but something unexpected happened. The lighthouse lantern began to flicker. The wind outside was so strong that it was causing the flame to waver. As the lantern went out, the ships at sea, including Charlie's fishing boat, would be lost in the storm. Buddy barked anxiously, sensing the trouble. Mr. Nicholas took a deep breath. "We can't let the light go out, Buddy," he said firmly. "We need to keep a way to keep it shining." The old lighthouse keeper knew that he had to do something, and fast. He rushed down the stairs and into the small storage room at the base of the lighthouse, looking for any tools or materials he could use to block the wind from blowing out the flame. After searching, he found a few old boards, some nails, and a hammer. With Buddy by his side, Mr. Nicholas climbed back up to the top of the lighthouse. He carefully boarded up the cracks in the windows, trying to keep the fierce wind from getting in. It wasn't easy. The storm was relentless, and his hands were cold. But he worked steadily, refusing to give up. When he finished, the flickering flame steadied, and the lighthouse beam shone brightly once again. Mr. Nicholas sighed in relief. The ships would still have their guiding light. But just as he sat down to rest, something even more troubled happened. The old generator that powered the lighthouse's lamp began to sputter and cough. Struggling against the cold, if it failed, the light would go out eternally. Mr. Nicholas frowned, his heart heavy. He knew that the generator was old and that it had never had to work so hard in such terrible weather. There was no way to fix it in time if he failed. He looked out at the stormy sea, thinking of all the ships relying on him. Then he had an idea. "Buddy," he said, turning to his faithful dog, "we may not have the generator, but we've got one more thing to try." Without hesitation, Mr. Nicholas grabbed his oil lantern, a small old-fashioned lamp to use for light when working at the base of the lighthouse. He lit it, and though its flame was much smaller than the great lanterns, it still glowed brightly. Then he carried the little lantern up to the top of the lighthouse and placed it where the great light usually shone. It wasn't as powerful as the usual beacon, but it was something as the small light flickered bravely against the storm. Mr. Nicholas prayed that it would be enough. Hours passed, and as Mr. Nicholas sat beside his lantern, watching over the sea, Buddy curled up at his feet, keeping his company. The storm raged on, and with a little light never went out, just as dawn began to break. Mr. Nicholas heard a sound at the distance, a faint horn of a ship. He rushed to the window and saw the fishing boat returned, its light blinking through the snow. Charlie's father and his crew had made it back, safe and sound. The villagers gathered at the shore, cheering as the boat pulled in. Charlie spotted Mr. Nicholas standing by the lighthouse, his small lantern still glowing. The boy ran up to him, his face beaming with gratitude. "You did it, Mr. Nicholas," Charlie exclaimed. "You kept the light on, even in the storm." Mr. Nicholas smiled and patted Charlie's head. It wasn't the biggest light, but it was enough. The storm finally cleared, and that night the village held a Christmas Eve celebration. As the villagers sang carols and they exchanged gifts, Mr. Nicholas was honored for his bravery and dedication. But he waved off the praise, simply saying, "Sometimes even a small light can make a big difference. That Christmas, the village of Sea Haven learned a valuable lesson. It wasn't the size or brightness of the light that mattered. It was the love, care, and determination behind it. Even in the darkest of times, the smallest act of kindness, the smallest spark of hope could shine through and guide others to safety. And from that day on, the villagers knew that as long as Mr. Nicholas and his little lantern were there, they would always have a light to guide them home. Here's our life lesson. The story of the little Christmas lighthouse keeper teaches us that even the smallest efforts can make a big difference, no matter how tough things get. Showing love, care, and the determination can help others through difficult times. It's not always about being the biggest or the strongest. Sometimes the simplest act of kindness, like keeping a light shining, can be enough to guide others to safety. Holy moly, folks. Wasn't that awesome? Thank you for visiting Santa. We'll see you on the next episode of Storytime by Santa.